We move now to item 10, which is our emergency budget monthly update, and I welcome to the table Nicola and Pramod and Ross. No. Thank you, our amenities. Go well. Continue what you're doing. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Through you, Madam Chair, as you've introduced, Nicola Mills and I will be presenting the emergency budget update for the period ending 31st of March 2021. The report this month contains the usual monthly financial dashboard, which provides an indication of how we're tracking against the emergency budget settings, and also a progress update on the savings target. And those were reflected in the recommendations in the previous slide. In terms of group performance to the end of March, the trends continue as per previous months, and overall the group is favourable against the direct revenue and direct expenditure settings and below budget to date against the CapEx investment budget to date. The direct revenue trends continue with better than expected performance for both regulatory and water care revenue being much higher than the emergency budget assumptions. One thing that has changed from the previous month, even though overall group direct expenditure is continuing to be favourable, we've seen that Auckland Council's indicators have improved from on track to favourable. And this is related to some projects being delayed, as well as some of the larger regional grants that will be deferred into the next financial year. Capital expenditure is also tracking below budget to date at about 87% of year-to-date budget. What we're finding is that in some areas of the group that we are experiencing issues to supply chain and other factors that are indicating that the full year budget may not be achieved. At this stage, the expectations are around 90% achievement, but this is just provisional results that we have at the moment. Next month, when the full quarterly report is presented, further details will be provided then. So even though we won't be meeting our asset recycling target this financial year, as I've updated in previous meetings, there's a timing delay in relation to when the cash received for the full 244 million target is achieved. Given the much better than expected revenue performance to date, as well as a slight slowdown in the capital expenditure, we're expecting that the year-end financial position will be better than that projected in the emergency budget. What this means is that it does provide an additional buffer against any future shocks, and as you know, we've still got an LTP to work through as well. The other thing to point out is that there still remains a high level of uncertainty with longer term revenue projections. So I'll hand over to Nicola now to talk through the savings update.
Thanks, Pramod. Good morning, everyone. So I'm pleased to be able to report today that we have got to just over 119 million towards our $120 million savings target for the year. As Pramod mentioned, at the end of the third quarter, we had quite favourable results. We had a good review of our spending compared to the budget, and we're able to identify places where we don't require to spend that in the last quarter of the year. And this had allowed us to achieve just over 10 million of savings mentioned in the first point on the slide. We also, through being able to vacate some of the office premises, which was all planned throughout the WorkSmart program, but there's been some acceleration of that, and that's allowed us to be able to make some savings in corporate property costs. So, yep, that's the good news, although we'll acknowledge, of course, that it has required some sacrifice and a lot of hard work along the way as well to get to this point. Happy to take any questions.
Right, before we open for questions, I'll move the recommendations to have I lost my deputy. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mulholland. Questions? Councillor Dalton.
Thanks, Nicola and Pramod. It's been a really hard ask, that 120, and I'm just wondering, of that, how much, we've got 90 planned for the next 3 years, haven't we? Each year for the next 3 years, we're going to continue to save 90 of the 120. How much of the 120 were one-offs that will not realise that, let me think about this. Yes, how many of the 120 were one-offs?
Through the chair. So in terms of towards the 90 million, at the moment we have around 47 million that is contributing towards the 90.
Thank you. That's tough.
It is tough. It is. Councillor Coombe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora korua. I acknowledge as well the hard work and the sacrifice. This is really our only opportunity, I think, to ask just about the impact on staff and our capacity and resourcing around kind of critical areas. And I just feel that we need to kind of keep checking in that that the resourcing is, although we've got to make these cuts, we're still putting the resourcing in the right places. And one area that I've become concerned about is to hear that we've had a massive increase in noise complaints. So going from across the Auckland region, averaging about 1,000 complaints, we're now up to 1,400, which is just, a phenomenal increase. But at the same time, that team is experiencing cuts and restructuring and being put under a lot of pressure, which is going to have a whole lot of domino effects. So I just wonder if there's a way that we can and it's not fair to be looking at Pramod and Nicola about this, but I do feel that there needs to be a way in which we can have some visibility around what it means for our public-facing staff who are dealing with a huge, upturn in issues. And I know it's across a whole lot of areas, whether it's, particularly in regulatory
Councillor,
services.
it's not a financial question, so I'll answer. We have a workshop on it coming up, all right, that we will, just on noise, all right? So we'll be able to answer all your questions in that workshop.
I just raised noise as one area, but it's sort of like, how can we get some visibility just to be ensuring that the pressure isn't being put on staff in a way that's going to have a detrimental impact on them, but also mean we just can't respond to whether it's noise or other issues that might have changed. And I think, say, like with the noise one, the observation's been made that people are very anxious, there's heightened levels of stress, and that's contributing to more noise complaints where previously people might have tolerated noise from their neighbours. So it's might be just a one-off issue that we've had this big uptake. So I just would like to get some sense of how we're responding.
I know that the workshop, as I said, is coming up, but also the staff numbers are reported in the quarterly updates as well. So maybe keep your questions for the quarterly updates. Staff hearing them now, they'll be able to cover that in a quarterly update. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Cashmore.
Yes, thanks for the report. And I also commend you on your 119 out of 120. It's a pretty sterling effort in challenging times. Also note the 87% fulfilment of CapEx to date. Usually in the last 3 months or so, the last quarter, we actually get quite a big uptake in the capital. It's a bit of a frenzy, but it's a thing of climate and also projects coming to fruition. You're not expecting that to happen this time. You're saying 100% is unlikely to be met.
Through you, Chair. At this stage, the indications are that 100% will be difficult with the phasing through the emergency budget. Even though we do get an uplift in that final quarter, usually that's how the budgets were phased as well. There wasn't a straight line, so there usually is a higher budget to achieve in that final quarter as well. A lot of the issues are not in our control, which is impacting some of the slowdown, but 90% is is still a pretty large number against the 2.7 billion CapEx budget.
But note, Madam Chair, I think 10 years ago we were struggling to get into the 70s.
Yeah, that's right. Councillor Stewart.
Yes, I was just picking up on what Councillor Coombs was saying about the noise control. I'm pleased that we're going to be following up on that, but I think we're going to find that now that we've got all this infill housing and all this intensification, we're going to have a lot more of this. So it is going to be something that we're going to have to really think about very hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and once again, congratulations to everyone working under these difficult conditions. I guess my question, and it is a staffing one, so it's just probably for the long term. I know that the pressure has been tough on staff, but also we're getting a lot of good staff leaving. Well, all staff are good, but we're getting a lot of staff leaving, not just being made redundant. So I'm concerned, at what point do we put the green light out that actually the pressure isn't there anymore? Because I have a worry that we're losing people because they're worried they might be up for redundancy. So at what point do we signal that actually this is a cooling phase and we're back on track, the emergency's over? Because I know there's a lot of fear out there of, is our department next, kind of thing. And I think that probably adds costs long term, because then we have to advertise for new jobs and train up people. That's the first question. And of the asset recycling, because that was predicated on the overall budget as a lever, where do you think that's going to sit? Could that affect staffing and capital works next year if we don't get on top of what we had in the budget?
Through the chair, Councillor Hills, thank you for those questions. Very difficult questions, actually. The first one, of course, around pressure being off. Well, as you heard, we've got 47 million of the 90 for next year that we've embedded on an ongoing basis. So there's still some work to do there. As we talk about savings, another way to reflect savings is cost reductions. Now that there hasn't been in every situation a case of just making savings and being able to achieve the same output. So it's a very difficult mix. It is a mix that really sits with the CEO. So I'm leaving that space for the quarterly reviews and those discussions that come through, because it's that mix of resources and wellbeing that have to be managed for all staff. So I don't have anything other than continue to ask those questions as part of those ongoing discussions. Yes, we're very proud as an organisation of where we've got to on meeting that dynamic, and we're well aware of the impacts that it has on staff as well. So it's a huge tension that you've identified and that Councillor Coombs has identified that we have to manage. So please keep on mentioning it. The second question was around asset recycling. We are confident around the timing of that asset recycling and the turn up of that within the next year. We have a number of levers that obviously work in tandem, and this year we've had that buffer that's allowed the reasoned approach to asset recycling to work, so that we can optimise the value from that asset recycling over that slightly longer period. If that was to be delayed, then we'd have to look at some of the other aspects that turned up. Absolutely.
And thank you very much for that, Peter. The last question is just on the capital. If things start to improve again in the next couple of months, is there flexibility in the 10-year budget to bring any capital forward or anything like that? Because I know we keep talking about the rainy day, but in my opinion, at the moment it's pouring. I can't imagine a more rainier day than, if we're looking back a couple of years, this is pretty significant weather. So I just wonder how flexible, if we're tracking even better in a couple of months' time, that we can sneak some more capital into the mix and or do we have to keep revisiting it? Does the organisation have the flexibility to bring some projects forward if we are tracking better?
Through you, Chair, I think the key thing to note there is, based on the current mayoral proposal, there is a significant increase in the investment over the next 3 years in the capital program. So for some parts of the business or the group, you're increasing investment over 100 million between this year and next year, which is a big jump already. So you're kind of going from a standing start to, full throttle next year. So we're continuously looking at phasing the program, and timing changes do occur, but in terms of the overall investment, that is still being worked through the long-term plan process. Probably a different conversation, but there already is a significant increase factored in over the next 3 years.
Kia ora, thank you. And I definitely know that. I just know the gap of renewals and things is actually much larger than the increase that we're doing. But take that on board, and thank you for those answers.
Any more questions for staff before I ask them to move? Wonderful. Thank you very much for your work in the space. Now I'll open for comments. Do we have any comments, Your Worship?
Yeah, really to pick up Councillor Hill's point, in the Merrill proposal, we took extraordinary steps to bring forward $900 million worth of spending that most people probably originally didn't think would have been possible, and still get a prudential and balanced budget. I welcome the fact we will find the 120 million, and that's a message we've got to get out, because when I look at the consultation process, the number of people that came back and said, why don't you try making some internal savings? And, here we are. I don't know what we used to save a year. It was 7. And now we've saved in the last year 120 million. And I don't want to pretend that was easy. That came at the expense of salaries sometimes. Sometimes it came at the expense of jobs. Sometimes it was that we just brought forward the value for money savings that is an integral part of what our responsibilities are. If we do better than we imagine, there won't be any problem in spending the money, either on capital or OPEX. And I was talking to Councillor Sayers yesterday about, road sealing and the hit that took. And obviously, if there's money that does come back to us that we weren't anticipating, we've got projects that we can move on. But I just want to remind everybody of the discussions we had during the emergency budget. I think Councillor Wayne Walker was the one that raised it, and I agreed 100% with it. The need to keep that freeboard there, because we still don't know what's around the corner. And, we'll do better in revenue than what we're anticipating on current trends. But that will counterbalance the fact that there will be a delay in realising the value of the asset sales. And I don't want anybody to believe that, hey, we're through it all now, and the chequebook can come back out, we can freely write the cheques, we can spend a whole lot more money. We are absolutely not in that position. But what we are in a position, because of the competency of our finance team, and I want to thank them for that, Pramod and Nicola and Peter, we're in a position where we're getting the balance of our budget is in the right place. We are coming through this crisis. We have not had to do things that rip the guts out of our services. We have not slashed our capital programs. We're continuing to build that infrastructure. We haven't disrupted that process, but things are still incredibly tough. So I think, pat yourself on the back with one hand and say, job well done, but look at the challenge that we've still got in front of us. And we must err on the side of caution. Because if something does go badly wrong again, we're still not in a position where we can guarantee that there won't be level 3 lockdowns. That could happen, could be just around the corner, and we need to make sure that we have managed our budget in a way that we can deal with those as yet unplanned for, and hopefully shocks that won't arrive. But you've got to be prepared for that. So big thank you to the team for what they've done, and congratulations to everybody around here that made those hard decisions. But please don't feel that we're at the point now where the constraints are off and we can throw the chequebook at it. We can't.
Thank you, Your Worship. How true. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I support C, I support all of them, but particularly C, because I agree. We need to be very careful about how we go forward, and we need to have that headroom. And also, I remain concerned about the $90 million, right? We don't get a health and safety focus in this report. It's operational, you would say. Actually, it will fall to us. I have concerns about how much do we ask. 47 million so far towards 90 for next year, and it is really tough already. I have concerns. There are service level drops, you know, and we will deal with those. But I do worry about the pressure on the staff and finding those savings. They may come from other areas. I know the CEO is still doing the work on what we do as a council, and there may be savings in there. But just congratulations to the staff who I know are really doing all they can, and to get to 120 is incredible. If it was 7 in previous years, 120 in a COVID year, you know, there were a lot of savings to be had in some respects, although there were costs that we had to factor in as well. We had no income coming in, so that made a huge difference as well. But I just want to say that jury is out for me. I support the consultation on 90 million, absolutely. But some more information coming on how it really is going to impact going forward. And a little bit of that can be found in the Audit and Risk Committee papers, and I think that we need to keep a good eye on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sage. Comments. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably just a very quick comment around the round C and the importance of asset recycling. Really just bring a focus on to our decision making around the downtown car park. I mean, that's going to be a significant contributor towards achieving that overall number.
Absolutely. Look, with no further comments, I just want to add my own. And one of the things we all struggle as councillors, and I think the Mayor as well, I'm sure the Mayor as well, is getting any good news out there. And what this report does is it highlights the amount of savings and efficiencies that we've done as a council in times of toughness to prove to Aucklanders that we can operate more efficiently and with less money. It's always hard for me to try and help you and everybody else understand how much is 119 million. You know, we deal in big numbers. So I've done some work around that, and it would be wonderful if everybody's social media profile helped me with this. But just to give you a bit of an idea, Albert Eden, this 119 million is more than all the residential rate take from your ward in rates. 190 million is more than the total rate take from Devonport Takapuna. 119 million is more than the total rate take from the Hibiscus and Bays. 119 million is more than the total rate take from Rodney. 119 more is more than the total rate take from Upper Harbour. It's more than the residential rate take from Waitemata. It is a huge amount of money. Well, I'm afraid it's not. I'm afraid that wonderful line cannot. Sharon and Paul and myself, unfortunately, can't give that. We exceed that 120 million, but everybody else can. Everybody else can say that, and I just think it helps you help tell the story to your communities how big that savings target has been. That's the good news. But the bad news is to only have achieved 60 million out of $250 million for asset recycling is really, really, really behind the 8 ball. So C is a very nice way of saying we're not out of the woodwork yet. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to add my thanks to the staff. This has been incredibly tough. This whole year we were up for, you know, nearly $500 million worth of lack of revenue, and we have done our bit. We have done our bit to find efficiencies and savings, and it's been very tough. So Peter, to you and all your team, Nicola, Pramod, Ross, huge thanks from us. We've got a quarter to go. This is only to the end of March, remember. So on that happy note, dare I say it, or cautious happy note, balanced note, I'll take this to the vote. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.